Your story matters, don't let it fade. When everything changed, you were made.
Everything changed when the doctor said there was nothing else that they could do for me. So I was left. I was left by the medical community and dismissed by doctors. I was left with more questions than answers. I was left to figure it out on my own. I was left with no hope. And I was left to die. Have you ever been left? You may have been left in so many different ways. You may have been left by parents. You may have been left by family, left by adults in authority, left by friends, left by teachers, left by spouses. Fill in the blank. I'm going to take you back to times in my life where I was constantly being left in more ways than one. In the quiet of the night, a tragedy unfolded that would forever mark my life's journey. My twin sister, Shannon, passed away in the crib laying next to me at just 3 weeks old. And I was left, not just physically, but left with the unknown of what could have been. I was left with a hole in my heart that honestly has never quite been filled throughout my entire life. Now, growing up, my childhood was a battlefield, not a sanctuary. My parents got a divorce when I was in middle school, and it really wasn't a surprise with all of the conflict, the fighting, and just the chaos. So, after the divorce, a moment in time that echoed the violence to its peak. My mother, in a fit of anger, aimed a gun at my father during a custody exchange, and the echoes of not only my voice, but the voice of my siblings begging her to stop will forever be etched in my memory, and it has left unimaginable scars. And because back then, they thought it was a really good idea to let children testify in court, even if you were young. I was completely left in that courtroom. I had a decision to make. If I told the truth and I kept my father out of jail, that meant further wrath from my mother. So I was left on the tightrope, balancing truth versus safety. No burden a child should ever have to bear. And now this leads me into my teenage years, where an unspeakable act happened behind closed doors. And man, I was left. I was left feeling the shame and the guilt, and honestly left with questions like, man, did that really just happen? How did that happen? And then I was left having to walk around holding it in because I was too scared to tell anybody. And then when I finally broke open and told my story, man, was I left with some major shame because there were people in my life, some of my closest people, that didn't quite believe me. And that takes me into adulthood. As a young adult, I had to make a choice. I had to choose to leave an abusive relationship. He not only promised to end our relationship, he promised he would end my very existence. And that night, I was left laying awake in bed the entire night, praying to God that he would not wake up and finish what he started. I was left laying in bed trying to plan my next move. I was left with a choice. And thank God I made the choice. And I grabbed every ounce of strength I had. And I walked out that door and I never looked back. Now, years later, one of the most gut-wrenching times in my life where I was left really should have been a time of joy, anticipation. I had just received word that I had got a really good, high-paying management position. And of course, I thought it was because they saw all the opportunity in me, right? Now, during the interview, they ask you all these questions. And there was a question that said, ding, ding. You'd think that that's what it said, but not me. I was naive and young. So, are you done having children? And I was like, what? And he's like, it's okay. That's just a routine question. And so, of course, I'm young and naive, and I'm like, all right, great. But because of that, I didn't see the red flag hitting me in the face. So then, when I got the amazing news that I was pregnant, something that took me a long time to get, I was so excited to tell my boss. I finally didn't lose a baby, and I finally was pregnant. And it was met with a cold expression and dead silence. And after about 2 minutes of that, only one question followed. So when's it due? It? I mean, has your child ever been called it? I mean, this was a time of joy and celebration, anticipation. And I had to realize that the life of my child was less important than the bottom line because it clashed with this company's busiest time of the year. And man, was I left. At 6 months pregnant, I lost my job. And I had to try to figure out health insurance. Remember, I'm 6 months pregnant. How am I going to pay bills? Okay, you know what? I got this. I'll get a job. I was terrified of interviews. I got the interviews. That wasn't the problem because on paper, I looked great. The problem is, I knew that when I walked into that room and they saw that jelly belly, I had no chance. And that was the truth. Nobody would hire me. And thankfully, God always has a plan, right? And that literally led me into my nursing career. And I would never change any of that. Then years later, I had to navigate the stormy waters of a divorce. After 15 years of marriage, I was left with questions. I was left having to figure out single motherhood. I was left trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to raise these kids and how do I want to raise these kids? Left to figure out the strength that I had inside of me and left to relearn to love myself. And all of this brings me to the most important part in my life where I was left by the medical community. It was 2020. Everybody knows what that was, right? COVID. Okay. And at the time, I was a night shift nurse, and it worked great for our family because I could work all night and I could sleep all day while the kiddos were in school. Then COVID hit. So now I'm working all night, driving 1 hour home, and then staying awake all day long, helping the kids with school, and then just repeating that cycle, right? Burning the candle at both ends. And I'm sure, like everybody in the world, eating like garbage, drinking like garbage, exercising like garbage. Being on the front line in nursing, I mean, I was stressed to the max. So by September, I had nothing left in me, guys. I went for a routine checkup, and I went home that night, went to bed with a flat stomach. And when I woke up the next morning, I looked like I was 6 months pregnant. Now, of course, I looked down and I knew, okay, I had not slept for 6 months and magically woke up pregnant, right? But it was right out to here. You could put a full place setting on my belly. Hard. I was nauseous. I couldn't eat. I was in tons of pain. Called up the doctor, said, I realized you saw me yesterday, but I look like I'm pregnant. What? Come on in. And that was my journey of starting to be poked and prodded like a lab rat. This test, that test. Some doctors were great. And then other doctors made me feel alone. And to be honest, like a disease that nobody wanted to talk about. One doctor, after tons of testing, and we'd already ruled out some things, looked at me and said, yeah, it's nothing. Okay, I'm a nurse, buddy, right? I've gone through the checklist. Now, thankfully, they were able to narrow it down. They said, okay, Sharon, it's not feces, it's not fluid, it's not air, it's not a tumor. They're like, your organs are so inflamed, there's literally like no room for them. Okay, so now what? Well, okay, the goal is going to be to get the inflammation out of your body. Okay. So I did everything they told me, right? I took this pill, I took that pill, I took this drink, I took these drops, I did the FODMAP diet. I did it all. And for 6 solid months, I looked like this every single day. Hard rock belly, going into the grocery store, doing the bottle because you're pregnant, and having people say, oh, when's the baby due? Super awesome. And then after 6 months, they sat me down and said, Sharon, I don't know how to tell you this. There's nothing else we can do for you. And I was left with more questions than answers, and left to figure it out on my own, and left with no hope. And I was left to die. Now, thankfully, I did find a solution because I had done so much life review, like so many of my hospice patients had done in the past. I started thinking about all of the times in my life that I had been left. And I'm like, you know what? You know what, Sharon? Everybody in this world has left you. You are not going to leave you. And I made the decision to fight and do whatever it took. And so I stand before you, not just recovered, but thriving, guys. I stand here to show you that there is hope and you could do anything. I'm going to tell you a story that some of you might have heard called the starfish story. A man was walking down the beach and he looks down and he sees kind of a figure, looks like it's dancing. And as he gets closer, he realizes it's a little boy. And he's bending down and picking something up and throwing it into the ocean. And he gets there and he says, good morning. Why are you throwing all those starfish in the ocean? And the boy says, well, the sun's out and the tide's going out. And if I don't do this, they're all going to die. And the guy just laughs at him. Like, okay, you realize there are miles and miles of starfish on this beach, right? You can't possibly make a difference. And the little boy listened politely, and he bent down, picked up another starfish, and he tossed it out into the ocean. And he looked at that man with a big smile on his face. It made a difference to that one. And guys, all of these stories, all of these chapters in my life where I've been left, I was shown despair, but also resilience. I'm here to tell you that no matter what, no matter how many times the world has tried to leave you behind, like that starfish, I'm here to show you that you can make a difference and you can change. No matter how many times this world has said to you, sorry, there is nothing else we can do for you, and they've left you, you can reclaim your wellness. And it might be physical wellness, it might be mental wellness. No matter what it is, you can do it. I believe in you. I know that you've got it in you. Because you know what? This world needs the exact kind of beautiful that only you can offer it. So I'm going to leave you guys with this. Just like that starfish story, I want you to go out and I want you to make a difference to one person because it's worth it. And I want you to start with yourself. Thank you.
Your story matters.